Hey guys, Gabriel here. Like I said in the beginning, this is the Ender 3. This is supposed to be the best 3D printer of 2018 and the best 3D printer under $200. Now, like I said before, I don't agree with that statement, and the reason why is because I got this thing and it caused me nothing but trouble. I got maybe 1 or 2 good 3D prints out of it, but that was about it. Printer caused me nothing but stress. Failed print after failed print after problem after problem after problem. And I had this for about a month before we finally figured it all out. And it was a lot of problems involving the hot end, the extruder, the cold end extruder, filament, bed problems, and in this video I'm going to be explaining everything about that. So my first print was the test dog that came on the SD card that came with the printer. So it was a fairly decent print, but there was layer skipping, and after a lot of research we finally figured out how to fix that. It was layer skipping is pretty much under extrusion, which is really easy to fix. You just change your flow rate and change the settings, and I'll talk more about that in the future on how you can do that and how you can get perfect settings for your Ender 3. I continued my printing from there. I continued changing settings and getting bad prints and everything, and I finally found a setting that worked great for me. It produced almost a perfect, flawless print. Now that Pokemon was the print that came out phenomenally. It was printed without supports and it was just a little rough under the chin, but it still came out great. So from that point I started loading the G-code from that Totodile Pokemon onto other prints. But that still didn't quite work and I couldn't figure out why, and I still don't know why. So the next problem that we faced with was clogged nozzles. The clogged nozzle kept happening over and over and over again, and it was super frustrating. But one thing I found out was my retraction settings. You have to lower your retraction settings if you're getting a clogged nozzle. If you're getting a clogged nozzle over and over again, lower your retraction speed. It might cause a little bit of stringing, but that's fine. You can just go through and cut it off with like an X-Acto knife or something. So the next problem that I came out with was, like I said before, I kept loading the G-code onto other prints and just kept printing with those. But then the extruder gear kept clicking. It was like it was slipping on the filament, and we couldn't figure out why. But after a while, after changing settings and all these other things that did nothing, we finally figured out why. We re-leveled our bed the correct way. We were taking just like a little digital level and leveling the bed that way. And then I watched a video, and you just go through and you level it with a little piece of paper, because the Ender 3 has bed leveling knobs. It doesn't have auto leveling, which is something I would like to see. But so we re-leveled the bed, and that didn't help. And then we couldn't figure out why, and a couple weeks ago we finally figured out why. It was because the old extruder gear, the old extruder, cold end extruder, the filament was coming at it from an angle like this instead of coming at it straight on. It was coming at it from an angle, and it wore a groove into the cold end extruder, and I'll put up a pic of that. So as you saw in that picture, it had worn a solid groove in the hole that the filament went through. And so we ordered a nice metal cold end extruder that the filament wouldn't wear a groove in, and that was great. But before we found that out, we found out that yes, the nozzle was clogged. And so we went through and we cleaned it out, and we went through and cleaned out the nozzle and put it back on and started running a print, and it was working great. And then yes, another problem happened. The first layer on my print was coming out way too thin. It was coming. I had my layer setting set to 0.1 millimeter. This was coming out at so much thinner than it should have been, and it was becoming super hard to remove the print from without completely destroying my original bed. So as you guys saw in that picture, I had completely worn the original bed down so flat and smooth, and that completely destroyed the bed because the prints wouldn't stick to it like that. So we ordered a nice glass print bed, and for the time being, the aluminum platform that was under the original bed, I just put painter's tape over it, and that worked pretty well. And then the print came off the bed again, and at this point, that was my main problem. I didn't care if anything else was going wrong. I just wanted to make sure that the print was sticking to the bed. So I looked up a way to fix that, and I found out that you could just take an Elmer's glue stick and just run over just a thin layer over your print platform, and it would stick just fine. And yes, it did work, but my extruder gear was still clicking. And so we got the metal extruder, and it started working great until the clicking came back. So at this point, we knew that it couldn't be the cold end extruder because it was brand new. So what we did is, because of all my clogged nozzle problems, we bought an MK8 extruder hot end. And then we just waited. I didn't want to print anything because I knew it would all come out bad. And so we got our new extruder hot end and put it on, and it was just fine. So we had our new cold end extruder and our new hot end extruder, and the clicking came back. And so we figured it had to be something within the G-code, because the printer itself was working just fine. It had to be something in the G-code. So I went through and I tinkered the settings for everything. I tinkered the flow rate settings, and it started working just fine. Now the prints are coming out just like this. The prints are coming out great, just fine, coming out how they're supposed to. So what I would recommend for anyone who's getting a new Ender 3, first thing I would recommend printing is a filament guide. A filament guide is a great thing so that you don't have to spend money to get a metal extruder, so that you can just have the filament guide helping the filament go into the cold end extruder at a straight angle. That would be great for you to print as your first print. The next thing I would recommend is get an MK8 extruder or change your retraction settings. I recommend getting an MK10 extruder instead of just going through and changing the retraction settings, and getting a hardened steel nozzle. Those totally help the quality of your prints come out. Those totally help the quality of your prints, and they definitely just help everything overall. So pricing wise on the printer itself was around $237, which is fairly cheap for a 3D printer that prints coming out at great quality. But we also had to buy a glass bed. We also had to buy a cold end extruder. We also had to buy a new MK10 extruder. These things just added up on the price, and I'm pretty sure the printer itself came out to around $300, including filament. So I don't know if pricing-wise this is an ideal printer. Now, would I recommend this 3D printer to any beginner? Yes, absolutely. I am a beginner to 3D printing, and this printer has, yes, it has been frustrating, but it's great if you're a beginner because you learn all the parts of the 3D printer, because when it first comes, you have to assemble it. And that helps with the learning curve of 3D printing. it helps you learn all the different parts, so you can call them, so you can name them correctly when you're looking up questions. It just everything helps when it comes to this printer. It's a great beginner's printer because yes, you will get frustrated, you will have problems, but that's just part of the learning curve, so you know if you get another printer, you can make sure to avoid that so you don't have any problems. This is a great printer for beginners, and I definitely recommend getting it.